At the dawn of her career, a young woman set out on a morning jog that unexpectedly turned into a true disaster. This incident quickly made the front pages of all Irish media outlets and sparked a huge public outcry, stirring waves of indignation among many citizens. The investigators were burdened with an incredible weight of responsibility, and the conclusions drawn from their work shocked the public even more. It was incomprehensible to everyone how such an incredible event could occur. Ashling Murphy was born on July 6, 1998, in the small village of Bluebell in Ireland, where she grew up with an older brother and sister under the caring wing of her parents. The family had a passion for music, laying the foundation for Ashling's musical talent from a young age. She began playing the violin, gradually honing her skill, participating in school and community performances, playing in an orchestra, and eventually ranking among the top 5% of violinists in the country. Despite her deep passion for music, Ashling decided to pursue a different career, dreaming of becoming a teacher. She successfully graduated from college, obtained the necessary qualifications, and at 22 years old, in March 2021, she took up a position as a primary school teacher. From her very first days on the job, Ashling won the love and respect of her students and colleagues, approaching teaching with boundless enthusiasm and striving to make the educational process as engaging and interesting for children as possible. Moreover, Ashling and her beloved Ryan were floating plans for a wedding in the near future, also aiming to build their own home and start a family. Everything promised a prosperous and joyful future, filled with shared dreams and life optimism. However, in January 2022, their idyllic plans were abruptly disrupted. On January 12th, after the end of the school day, Ashling decided to take the opportunity for a jog since regular physical exercise played an important role in her life. She preferred a route along a scenic water canal flowing through the small town of Tullamore, which was popular among residents for dog walking, bike rides, or simply for relaxing in the fresh air. Before setting out for her jog, Ashling shared her plans with her mother, who somehow felt uneasy and suggested her daughter choose a different route. But Ashling confidently assured her mother of her safety, hugged her, and went on her jog around 3:15 p.m. Along the way, two women, also jogging past the canal, noticed a bicycle abandoned on the side of the road. Soon after, they heard sounds resembling muffled female screams coming from a wooded area on the left side of the path. Assuming someone might need help after falling off the bicycle, they rushed towards the sounds, intending to offer the necessary support. In this grim place, a far more sinister and terrifying scene unfolded before them. They found a young woman on the ground with a man standing over her, wielding a knife. It appeared the woman was trying to free herself, but the attacker held her firmly. Seeing witnesses to his crime, the man turned to them and brazenly demanded they leave. Neither of the women had their phones with them, depriving them of the opportunity to immediately call the police, and there was no one around who could help. Nonetheless, not losing courage, they began to scream at the attacker, demanding he release the victim. Realizing the criminal was unresponsive, they hurried to the nearest populated area to seek help. Soon, police and medical workers arrived at the scene, but it was already too late to save the young woman. By that time, the attacker had vanished, leaving his victim lifeless on the ground. First aid administered at the scene was unsuccessful, and Ashling Murphy was pronounced dead. The police quickly identified the deceased, next to whom her keys were found, leading investigators to conclude she had attempted to defend herself. Forensic experts discovered 11 stab wounds and signs of strangulation on Ashling's body, indicating blood loss as the cause of death. The news of the tragic murder of the young teacher instantly spread throughout the county, deeply shocking and disturbing the local community. The area previously considered safe and tranquil was suddenly overshadowed by this rare and horrifying crime, especially since Ashling was well known to many through her work at the local school. Law enforcement officers mobilized all their resources to capture the perpetrator. As a first step, they interviewed the two witnesses who had encountered the attacker face to face. These women provided a description of some of his physical features. Although they were too far away to see the attacker's face, they were able to accurately describe his clothing. Additionally, the police concluded that the bicycle found at the side of the road belonged to the attacker, suggesting he had left it to flee on foot. As part of the investigation, the bicycle was seized, and its images were circulated through the media in hopes of helping to identify its owner. The police also reviewed surveillance camera footage, hoping to spot the criminal on video. They indeed spotted a man on a bicycle, but the image quality was not sufficient to reveal any specific details useful to the case. A woman who had been walking along the canal 2 hours before the crime joined the investigation. She reported noticing a man on a similar bicycle following her. His slow pace and refusal to overtake her seemed odd to her. Though this information did not significantly advance the investigation, it suggested that the perpetrator might have been selecting his victim for some time before choosing Ashling. Experts analyzed information from the victim's fitness tracker, which allowed them to more accurately determine the timeline of events. She left her residence at 2:51 p.m., and half an hour later, the tracker began recording abnormal activity, likely indicating the moment of the attack. By 3:31 p.m., the device no longer recorded a heartbeat, marking the moment of Ashling's death. That evening, a 40-year-old man was arrested on suspicion of committing the crime, but details of his identity were not disclosed, only mentioning that the suspect was taken in for questioning. The following day, it was revealed that he was mistakenly suspected, and his involvement in the crime was ruled out. Despite this, the man's name and photo were circulated by the media, resulting in him becoming the target of insults and threats. The tragedy gained national resonance in Ireland by the second day after the incident, eliciting reactions from many political figures and drawing public attention. Thousands of people from various parts of the country gathered for memorial services, demanding that authorities find and punish the criminal. The police confirmed that none of Ashling's acquaintances were among the suspects, considering evidence that the perpetrator had been selecting his victim for a long time, patrolling on a bicycle along the canal. This information only heightened the community's concern, leading residents of the town and surrounding areas to avoid solitary walks, preferring group outings, and living in a state of constant fear of a possible new attack by the criminal. 5 days after the tragedy, an unforeseen event occurred. The police department's email inbox received a message confessing, "I killed Ashling Murphy. I am very sorry." Without delay, experts traced the sender's IP address and swiftly identified his identity. However, the man claimed he had no recollection of writing the letter, citing his mental disorders and alcohol dependence, which led to episodes of amnesia. He insisted on his innocence, and the police, after conducting a check, confirmed his words, finding no grounds to consider him involved in the murder. Subsequently, the investigation led to a discovery that became a key lead for the inquiry. During the autopsy, skin particles were found under the victim's nails, indicating her attempts to defend herself. DNA analysis of these samples showed they belonged to an unidentified man. Although the DNA profile of the perpetrator did not match any known to the police, this clue offered the possibility of definitively establishing his involvement in the crime upon further arrest and DNA comparison. Considering the possibility that Ashling might have seriously injured her attacker, investigators began calling hospitals in the area, hoping the criminal had sought medical assistance. These efforts were successful when a Dublin hospital, located about 100 kilometers from the scene, reported a man with cuts on his face and penetrating abdominal wounds. He sought help 2 days after the murder and could not provide doctors with a convincing explanation for his injuries. The medical staff noted that the injuries were severe enough to pose a threat to his health. Investigators went to the hospital to meet with 31-year-old Joseph Pushka to learn details of his story. Joseph recounted that he was attacked by an unknown person wearing a medical mask, making it impossible to remember any distinctive features. He noted that everything happened too quickly to catch any details or provide further information. Showing him a photo of Ashling, detectives tried to find out if he was familiar with the case, but Joseph replied that due to his limited English and lack of interest in news, he was not aware of this story. This account raised suspicions among investigators, who decided to delve deeper into Joseph's background. They discovered that he moved to Ireland from Slovakia in 2015 and worked as a construction worker, living with his wife and 5 children in a small village near the incident location. And having relatives in Dublin, Joseph came under police scrutiny. During the investigation, 2 of his homes and vehicles were searched. though information about the findings was not disclosed. A return visit to the hospital, where Joseph was admitted after surgery, took an unexpected turn. Despite his initial denial of involvement in the events at the canal, he suddenly changed his story, claiming he tried to protect Ashling from another man's attack, who inflicted his wounds. This turn of events clearly raised doubts among detectives, as it contradicted the gathered evidence. The interrogation continued until Joseph made a sudden confession. "I did it. I killed. I am the murderer." This abrupt admission shocked the investigators, who immediately informed him of his arrest. Joseph was to spend several more days in the medical facility until his condition would allow for his transfer to the police station for further custody. Investigators assured that after his discharge, he would be arrested and given the opportunity to elaborate on his version of events during an official interrogation. However, Joseph did not wait for the official procedures and began to openly talk about the crime. He confessed that he lost control upon seeing an unfamiliar woman, aggressively attacked her, delivering multiple stabbings, and ultimately strangled her. He cited a sudden panic as the motive for his actions. In tears during his conversation with the police, Joseph inquired whether he faced a 10-year sentence and showed investigators 3 puncture wounds on his abdomen, the marks left by Ashling's keys. Apparently, she managed to hit him with such force that even a not particularly sharp object could penetrate the attacker's body. Joseph also provided a DNA sample, which perfectly matched the DNA found under Ashling's nails. As his hospital discharge awaited, Ashling's funeral took place, drawing national attention. The ceremony gathered Ireland's leading state officials, including the president, and crowds of people outside the church walls. Thousands of educational institutions across the country observed a moment of silence in memory of the deceased, and our students lined up on the street holding pictures of their beloved teacher. That same evening, Joseph was arrested and transferred to the courthouse, where the police had to protect him from an enraged crowd seeking justice and trying to reach the suspect. The next morning, the press service disclosed the methods that led to tracing Joseph, as well as new information previously undisclosed for the sake of the investigation. It turned out that on the day of the crime, Joseph pursued at least 4 women on his bicycle, as evidenced by surveillance camera recordings and the women's accounts of his strange behavior. One victim reported that after Joseph followed her on his bike for a while, he dismounted and headed in her direction. Seeing a car ahead, she ran towards it, prompting Joseph to retreat. Another woman mentioned that he rode past her, staring intently into her eyes, then turned around and began the chase. These testimonies only strengthened the theory that Joseph was intentionally seeking a victim, and these women escaped harm only due to the presence of bystanders. Although Joseph had not come to the attention of law enforcement either in Ireland or in his homeland until this point in court, he unexpectedly claimed to have lost memory regarding his confession in the hospital and denied the murder. Instead, he reverted to the story of trying to save the girl from another man's attack, who, according to him, inflicted his wounds. However, Joseph could not explain how his DNA ended up under Ashling's nails. Given his refusal to admit guilt, Joseph faced a lengthy trial process. The preparation dragged on for months, but considering the extensive evidence, there was almost no doubt about a guilty verdict being delivered. Yet the prosecution continued to meticulously work on the case. A year and a half after the tragic incident, the investigation took an unexpected turn. Law enforcement announced the arrest of 5 people connected to Joseph, his closest relatives and friends. They were charged with intentionally concealing information and creating obstacles for the investigation. Although the details of these arrests were not disclosed, all the detainees were eventually released. The trial of Joseph began on October 17, 2023. He had to spend the entire preceding period in isolation from other prisoners, as his life was under threat. Joseph's attorney insisted on his client's innocence and demanded the exclusion of the confession made in the hospital from the case files, arguing that Joseph was under the influence of strong medication affecting his consciousness. However, this argument was refuted by the prosecution's medical expert, who stated that Joseph had not received any medications that could induce such an effect. The defense claimed that Joseph was merely trying to help Ashling in a critical moment when the witnesses noticed him, trying to stop the bleeding. But the defense could not explain why Joseph then told passersby to leave, instead of calling for emergency medical help. An extensive body of evidence was collected against Joseph, including DNA analysis results. 2 witnesses identified him, and 4 other women reported his suspicious pursuit on a bicycle on the day of the crime. The prosecution presented a narrative in which Joseph was deliberately looking for a victim to attack, scouting for an object over several hours, which sounded much more convincing than the defense's attempts to justify his actions. As soon as Joseph saw Ashling, he aggressively attacked her. In response, Ashling put up a determined resistance. She actively defended herself, scratching the attacker's face, and managed to land 3 powerful blows with a key to his abdomen. Joseph, encountering unexpectedly strong resistance, panicked and inflicted 11 knife wounds on Ashling before strangling her. After committing the crime, he left the scene, leaving his bicycle behind. Due to the severity of his injuries, he was forced to seek medical help 2 days later. Joseph's trial lasted less than a month, and on November 9th, he was unanimously found guilty, sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. During the court sessions, Joseph showed no signs of remorse for the murder. On the contrary, his behavior was defiant and mocking. After the verdict and transfer to a permanent detention facility, Joseph was immediately placed under 24-hour surveillance, as there was already a threat to his safety from other inmates who expressed a desire to meet him. Despite the clear evidence of his guilt, Joseph's relatives continued to insist on his innocence, and no charges were brought against them after the initial arrests. And it seems unlikely any will be after the verdict. Ashling's family expressed gratitude not only to the participants of the legal process and the police, but also to the entire nation for the immense support they experienced throughout the investigation. This level of solidarity proved invaluable to them.